What's up, Buffalo Bill fans? I haven't done a video in quite a long time. I know I only come do videos after losses, but this isn't really about the Pittsburgh game, or it's more about a little bit of a midway point video. I know it's 10 games in, the team is 3-7. We're kind of used to this at this point in the year. Young team, a lot of new faces, a lot of young people in important positions, or just people that have never had the position that they've had. But again, it was the first dud of the year, I feel. I don't know if it's to be expected, but every team does have kind of a dud game. It's kind of a hard situation to have three quarterbacks who pretty much haven't played, if they have, very, very minimally in 3 straight weeks. You got Thad Lewis, Jeff Toole, EJ Manuel. A lot of fans down on EJ after the Pittsburgh game, already calling for a new quarterback. That's very easy to say, but you want to keep spinning your wheels. Every time a new guy falters, you want to throw a new guy in, and if he doesn't look like the second coming of Dan Marino, Johnny Unitas, and Joe Montana, people want to flip the page. You got to remember, this was a team, prior regime gave 3+ years to Ryan Fitzpatrick, a journeyman 7th-round pick. It's better suited as a backup in most cases, if not even then. It takes time. I have to tell myself that a lot of times. It takes time. It's really easy, but after 5 3/4 games, it just cannot be that quick to say, you know, mullet, just throw your hands up in the air and say, I don't know what to do with this. That is knee jerking to the fullest, and I'll admit I'm guilty of it sometimes. I mean, there's certain throws and certain points of the game I just shake my head. I'm like, then I have to stop myself. I get a few days removed from the game. Just got to see him play more. I'm not saying he's going to be the guy. I'm not saying he's not the guy. I'm just saying he's got to play more. You've seen other quarterbacks who had good years last year who were rookies. RG3 has his ups and downs. People attribute that to the knee injury and the lack of practice time during the offseason. Same goes for EJ. He's missed some practice time. He's missed games. Knee injury. Young players need to play. Kaepernick, same thing. He's going through his ups and downs. Luck has had a few rough games this year. The prized Andrew Luck, the guy that is the surefire, can't miss prototype, best overall quarterback prospect since whoever. Yeah, he's had rough games this year. So it's gonna happen, and you have to keep it in perspective, and you have to look at how not to replace him, but how do you make it better for him? And I've been talking with a few Bills buddies of mine, and we've all come to the realization that they need to get better in certain areas, more particularly in an area that they addressed in the draft, and that's wide receiver. I feel like certain guys on this team, albeit they're really popular amongst Bills fans. Bills fans like them. They're good, feel-good stories, but I think that's where the Bills have just settled. They've settled in certain areas. They get a guy like Scott Chandler off of having tight ends like Jonathan Stupar and Derek Fine and Derek Schumann. These guys that are just not NFL players, and they just kind of settle. They're like, okay, we're fine there, and they can't do that anymore. And I'm not saying this new regime is doing that. There's only so many areas you can address in one off season, and this team has had 30+ player turnover, so that's a pretty good turnover in the roster. But it's just it's just an example. And Stevie Johnson, I think that you're starting to see his body break down. He's been gimpy the last few years. Now he's starting to miss games. He's going to go into a third year of an okay sized deal, and I just think you can do better there. I think Bills fans not to stop attaching their emotions to certain guys and just say, can we do better there? And in today's NFL, in a passing league, in a league that is predicated upon mismatches and matchups and in size, I think that that's an area the Bills can do better, especially at the number one wide receiver position. And albeit I've been talking to a few buddies of mine about a certain guy, and I'll mention his name in a few minutes. I think he's perfect. I think if the season keeps going the way it's going, I'm not saying they're not going to win any games. I'm not saying they're not going to lose some games still, but I think they'll be in position to get this guy. With the quarterbacks that are going to be taken, a couple of offensive linemen, the definitely a few defensive players are up there. I think they'll be in position to get this guy, and they would be foolish, in my opinion, not to pounce on Mike Evans. He's a wide receiver from Texas A&M. He's got tons of videos here on YouTube. He's a big guy in the mold of a just Calvin Johnson, Brandon Marshall, that style of receiver. Just a mismatched nightmare. He's a guy that if you play against him and the team he's on, he's gonna keep the defensive coordinator up extra hours wondering about how are we gonna shade coverage over towards him. How are we gonna get him, take him out of the game or as much out as possible? He's the kind of guy that, fans of other teams like, wow, this guy might burn us this week. We gotta let him get his, but stop everybody else. It's like when the Bills play the Patriots. Gronkowski, he's like, damn, this guy probably gonna score a couple of touchdowns on us because he always seems to. That kind of guy. And I think the Bills have for too long have not had that kind of guy. They haven't had that kind of guy in the passing game that just puts the fear of God into defenses. And I think that he would be perfect. He'd be the perfect complement to a guy like Woods, Goodwin. Graham is a guy I've kind of just, I don't even know. He's had so many opportunities to just step up. And I know the quarterbacking has been inconsistent, and that has a lot to do with it. But he's just vastly underwhelming. He makes a few catches, then he drops a ball, he fumbles. It just, I don't know. Him and Goodwin kind of cancel each other out, in my opinion. I think that they could probably do better there. I'm not married to him at all in terms of whether they keep him or let him go. The next position, and I'm not saying this is a position I necessarily would want them to take very early, but it's a position they're definitely going to address, and if they feel like a guy like this is going to be there in the second sometime, they would jump all over him, and that's offensive guard. They've had just a revolving door. I mean, they straight up cut Colin Brown, a guy who started 5 straight games for them after Doug Legursky was healthy enough to just practice. Well, actually, I think he started the game in, and then they just cut Colin Brown, straight up cut him. So I think that they'll have to think about that there for a second. But the guy that I'm thinking about they might take if they're in the certain position that they might be in is Gabe Jackson from Mississippi State. He's a mauler. You got to remember Marone coach guards like Jari Evans, Carl Nix down in New Orleans. So he's, seen what, elite offensive line play can do and keeping a quarterback comfortable, keeping a running game going. And I know that's not a sexy position. It's not a position that you want to take in the first round or maybe the second. Maybe they address it in the third, because I do think tight end is a position that they're going to have to address as well. And getting a player that is different, is a game changer at that position, just not a grunt blocker, not a designated pet. They need a guy that can do a little bit of both, a guy that's going to give you a little bit of a threat in both areas. And let me hear what you think, Bills fans. Defensively, obviously, you always add corners. They're probably going to add some corners. Definitely could address linebacker in terms of depth. I don't feel like certain guys like Nigel Bradham, who has done nothing this year. I mean, the only way you knew the guy was on the team was the pot arrest and the penalty that got the McKelvin touchdown pullback. That's the only way you knew the guy was on the team this year. And he's a guy I don't feel like that's long for the roster. He's done nothing. Moats, again, a guy that a lot of people like, but you can do better there. Definitely do better. So, Bills fans, let me know what you think. Let me know about the names that I threw out. There's other names at wide receiver, like Sammy Watkins, Jordan Matthews. But this guy Evans is just, and I know people with the size and stuff, but he's just, you look at his stat sheet and you see the big games against Auburn and Alabama. Those are the games he played the best against in the spotlight. How Manziel would just throw it up. He'd go up and get it in a crowd. And that's just something that, with the red zone issues and just the Bills need that. I really feel like they need that kind of different dynamic at wide receiver. So let me know what you think. Definitely always appreciate your questions and comments and your follows.